It was cold steel in the hands of brave men that forged the history of our civilization. From short blades to enormous two-handers, history has shown us a variety of unusual designs. Many of them had some quite interesting advanced features that you've probably never heard of. So let's find out the 20 most unusual varieties now.
Whoa, a sword sure would come in handy right now. But before we get into it, let me show you our sponsor for this video. A super ambitious RPG game, Raid: Shadow Legends. It's an immersive RPG game for your smartphone. Forget everything you think you know about mobile games, because Raid is going to change it all. The game is totally free, it's got an amazing storyline, awesome 3D graphics, giant boss fights, PvP battles, and hundreds of champions to collect and customize. Look how crazy the level of detail is on these champions. Best of all, if you go to the description of this video now and download Raid only through my link, you'll get 50,000 silver immediately and a free epic champion. Now let's get back to it.
Number 20. Urumi. Coming from India, this sword is a whip sword, also known as the curling blade. This 2 millennium-old sword has a blade so thin and long at the same time that it can effectively be used as a whip. With such a flexible design, it's made primarily for slashing, and you can hardly defend against it because it bends around shields or any other defending obstacles. Urumi is also effective as a defensive weapon, as fighters can whip it around their head to create a defensive bubble. Unsurprisingly, it's also very difficult to wield and dangerous to the user. Number 19. Tiger Hook Swords. These types of swords are traditional weapons associated with Chinese Kung Fu martial arts. Hook swords always come in pairs and are all about slashing. The hook tip is also used for grabbing weapons or tripping enemies. The crescent guards in the bottom of the hilt are also sharpened. What's especially cool is they can link together via hooks. When hooked, they turn into a longer, flexible weapon, extending their reach. Number 18. Scimitar. This is a legendary saber of the medieval Orient. Scimitars were famous for their unusually strong but light blades, due to the use of so-called Damascus steel, forged in a manner to provide both extreme hardness and excellent flexibility for their time. The excellence of scimitars on the battlefield also came from their curved design, which allowed cavalrymen to slice their opponents from shoulder to waist in full run whilst continuing to advance. Straight swords tended to get stuck. Number 17. Khopesh. This rare Egyptian battle sword of the ancient times was derived from a battle axe and had a blade with a crescent-shaped upper half. The curved top half provided excellent slicing and cutting power. Entire blades were about half a meter long, making them perfect for close-quartered battles. The inner part of the crescent blade was blunt and was used to disarm or trip opponents. Number 16. Conda. This was the preferred weapon of Indian Sikh warriors. Unusually, they used this sword with a straight, double-edged blade for slashing, which was enabled by its light, elastic blade reinforced with narrow strips of steel. It had another interesting feature as well, a short protrusion on the bottom of its hilt to grab the sword with 2 hands in order to inflict heavier strikes. Number 15. Ngambi and Gullu. This odd-looking sword comes from the cannibal Ngambe tribe of the Congo, who used it for ceremonial executions. The blade is elaborately designed for decapitating victims, since it's heavy and has a very sharp crescent-shaped top, which is sufficiently curved for executioners to cut off victims' heads in just one stroke. The decorated back also assists bearers to carry the blade on their shoulder, as the sword is heavy. After the ceremony was over, the tribe would then feast on what was left of the poor person. Number 14. Nair Temple Sword. This sword is closely associated to the Hindu Ma Nair Devi temple, dedicated to the mother goddess Nair. Even though it has a very mean look and a very sharp double-edged blade, it wasn't necessarily used for military purposes. Quite the contrary, it was mostly used for religious purposes. It even had small holes on the blade to attach charms and other trinkets. Number 13. Kata sword. This sword is unusual because it has an integrated handguard, which is made in the shape of a gauntlet, providing almost complete protection for the swordsman's hand. Inside the gauntlet is a shaft to hold the sword. Since the sword is strongly supported by the arm, patas were mostly used for powerful slashes and often wielded by mounted cavalry. Number 12. Campalon. This single-edged longsword was the favored battle sword of various ethnic groups in the Philippines because of its very strong blade made from the Damascus steel pattern welding process. The end of the blade is much broader and thinner than at its base, requiring a heavy divided hilt that balanced the blade, and is also thought to represent a mythical creature's open mouth. Along with being used in battle, it was wielded for headhunting, as was the case for Chief Lapu-Lapu, who defeated Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan with it. Number 11. Panabus. This is another sword from the Philippine archipelago. It was used equally as a tool and as a combat weapon. Distinguished for its proportionately long hilt made of hard wood, its uniquely long forward curving blade made it unique for swinging. So the sword was used for finishing off wounded enemies, though it was rarely ever used on the battlefield. Today it's used domestically, mostly for clearing unusually dense vegetation and slicing large chunks of tuna fish. Number 10. Falcata. These swords were versions of Macedonian kopis swords used in pre-Roman Iberia, which is present-day Spain. Similar to kopi, falcatas have forward curved single-edged blades, perfect for slashing as the weight pitches forward to the point, enabling it to deliver a blow with the momentum of an axe. Their distinctive feature is a curved grip and an unusual hooked hilt without a pommel, providing better protection for your hand. It was supremely effective, not only because of its shape, but also because of the quality of iron used to make them, and the process they used to bury the steel to corrode its weak points. Number 9. Estoc. This French sword, also known as tuck in English, was designed specifically for defeating enemies in chainmail or plate armor. It was this or concussive force, such as using a war hammer or mace. With a relatively dull edge, this sword would thrust through mail links or gaps in armor. Rather than being thin, this type of sword usually had a triangular, square, or diamond cross-section so that it's strong and robust enough to be used. Number 8. Flammer. This European sword gets its name from its distinctive wavy blade that resembles a flame. Dating to the 16th century, it had quite an unusual shape for its time. However, its awkward shape had a practical use. With an increased edge surface, wavy blades inflict heavier wounds than flat ones, as the sharp edges would drag through objects like a saw blade. Also, waves help defend the wielder as they add friction, preventing an enemy from sliding their blade over to injure you if you parry their attack. They were also reserved for distinguished swordsmen, so it was a way to showcase the swordsman's skill. Number 7. Twohander. Twohander in German stands for the Twohander. Being an enormous medieval sword, it required two hands. Being over 2 meters long and weighing a few kilograms, they were carried across the shoulder. These enormous weapons were a result of the medieval trend of increasing sword sizes. They were primarily intended to be used against spears or other spiked obstacles. Even though their blade was sharp on both edges, the real advantage was using their sheer weight to break opposing weapons.
Number 6. Katana. Katanas are some of the strongest and sharpest blades of them all, which is why they were reserved for samurai. And while you may like to call them samurai swords, that doesn't account for the different varieties of these swords out there. Still, they're famed because of their quality for their time, which results from a centuries-old Japanese sword-making technique that helps remove impurities within the steel, creating a stronger blade. Different variations of katanas are layered for their specific purpose, but in general, they're tipped with a sharp edge while the core of the blade is softer and more flexible. Made in this manner, katanas are both strong and flexible enough to withstand even the heaviest blows. They're often so sharp because they're polished for more than 2 weeks.
Number 5. Executioner's sword. Until the 16th century, standard swords were used for executions, but since then, special swords known as executioner swords were used, particularly in Europe, except for England where they used axes. Intended for two-hand use, they were double-edged blades with a blunt tip, since it was never used. Being tools of justice, they were decorated with symbolic signs, including images of Christ and combined with moralistic inscriptions. One such German sword had an inscription, "When I raise this sword, so I wish that this poor sinner will receive eternal life." The 3 holes at the end are also quite fascinating. They probably prevent the tip from being reshaped into a mundane weapon of war, or they were used to add weight to the tip for a heavier swing, or they could have made the blade whistle for dramatic effect. Number 4. Butterfly sword. Though sometimes referred to as knives because of their length, they look more intimidating than any knife I've seen. Butterfly swords' blades tend to be as long as human forearms and almost always come in pairs, which is presumably where they get their name from. They're also easily concealed and used in several Chinese martial arts for close-quartered fighting. Traditionally, the blade is sharpened from the middle to the tip, leaving the lower half blunt for inflicting non-lethal strikes. The guard is designed to protect the wielder's hand and also capable of being used like a brass knuckle. On the opposite side, the guard has a protrusion that can be used to hook an opponent's weapon. Number 3. Cane Sword. Sword sticks or cane swords are deceitfully clever objects. They appeared at the end of the 18th century as a fashion accessory. Since at the time it became socially unacceptable to carry a sword around, many men and women found the sticks as a perfect hiding place for their blades. Besides being used as a fashion accessory, cane swords were then and now as well used as self-defense weapons. The popularity of the weapon has never ceased. Today you can find a whole specter of cane swords online, even though they are strictly forbidden in many countries. Number 2. Combination Sword. The idea of combining firearms and cold weapons dates back to the first days of flintlock pistols. Since both weapons were typically used at the same time, it was natural to try and connect them. The first combination swords appeared in the late 16th century. They were particularly favored among pirates who used them for boarding purposes. However, their design was also popular among posh aristocrats. Still, they had many drawbacks since the sword was always in the way of the pistol and vice versa, making the weapon an off-balance sword and a heavy pistol. Number 1. Xofocar. This sword is considered the Muslim Excalibur. It was the most famous of 9 swords of the Prophet Muhammad and the only one that is lost. Xofocar was actually a scimitar with a distinctive 2-pronged point. The reason for such design is unknown because the bifurcated point does not make for a better sword. One legend says that the sword point was made in the shape of a snake's tongue, always targeting enemy eyes. The name itself may also give an answer since in Arabic, Xofocar means the cleaver of the spine. Still, there are a variety of conceptual designs out there to conceptualize what it may have looked like, and it's unusual to say the least.